Hello, everyone. This is Whitney Will from StarHearth Astrology, and we are on the eve of the October 2nd annular solar eclipse in Libra. We are coming to the end of our time between eclipses. I know a lot of stuff has been stirred up for me, so I'm sure it has been for you. I've been thinking about eclipses as the space of crossroads of these different stories that converge in time to ask us or nudge us if we want to do something about them or change course. And the thing about eclipses is that they interrupt the normal balance of things so that there are no longer obvious answers in the sense that we are not on autopilot. And yet, what they reveal is sometimes the obvious answer that was there, buried in all of our structures of thought and feeling and expectation, had clouded it. And when we have eclipses, it can make the true answer, the path ahead, quite. One time there was an eclipse, a south node eclipse on my ascendant 6.5 years ago. It was an Aquarius eclipse in 2018. And that eclipse allowed me to come out of the astrology closet, right? The south node eclipse, like the one on Wednesday, allowed this assumption, this need to be taken seriously, or what I thought it meant to be taken seriously, in all of my fears about letting people know about my love of astrology. That eclipse removed that and launched me on a path. And so these eclipses can remove these stories that we've told ourselves about who we have to be and who we are destined to become. And this, right, has to do so much in the natal chart with the nodes. And some people do not have nodal charts that the nodes are not particularly emphasized in their charts. And some people do. And I imagine that the feeling of living a life that is more fated, which is navigated intuitively, but has some sense that it's not just chaos, but that there is something that pulls you forward also and gives you an anchor to something before, is really profound. And especially during eclipses, and especially during eclipses that hit your chart in pronounced ways. I hope you are becoming what you feel is ripe to become in this space. I took a workshop over the weekend because I'm looking into becoming an expressive arts therapist and bringing this practice of creativity into my professional life. And so much of my own life and my own mental health and my own meaning has been found through making things with my hands and moving the feelings and the images and the symbols into form, through form, out of form, to process with hand. I'm also keenly aware that I'm in a 10th house year. using the technique of annual perfections. The 10th house year is so much about legacy, is so much about impact on the world and how we want to be seen and how we tolerate being seen or not, or obscured or not. And my 10th house is a place that I kind of quake in front of. I have Scorpio in the 10th, as do all Aquarius risings using whole sign houses. And Pluto in the 10th, ruled by Mars in Libra that is being eclipsed. So my 10th house is ruled by my out of sect malefic, in its detriment, ruled in turn by a retrograde Venus square to Pluto. Power is something that makes me deeply uncomfortable. Holding power over other people, receiving projections from other people that lead to having power. Sometimes even a really strong compliment can completely unsettle me, and I don't know how to respond. And it's in eclipses that we can, as Nietzsche says, rebaptize what we thought was our own badness into the best that's in us. Because there is a rebaptism, a seeing something anew when we remove the sun or the moon, when we remove ways of knowing. We can see things again clearly. So it feels a little fitting that on my Mars year, there would be a South Node eclipse on my Mars and an opportunity to meet this archetype anew, right? When you meet somebody and you have all these projections about who they are, and sometimes you realize you're wrong and you need to start over. Everyone deserves our curiosity. Mars in Libra. How do you do effective work through? How do you do it in a gentle, balanced way that is in accord with your personal principles? That's the question. That's my question. Your question is something else, depending on where it falls in your chart and what story you have been living out through these eclipses. And it is a good time to take stock of the Aries and Libra eclipse cycle, because this is our last Libra eclipse, and we will have one more Aries solar eclipse in the spring. But this is our last Libra eclipse. And as I said a year ago, we hadn't had a Libra solar eclipse for 18 years. For 18 years. And there's a different way saying that. My own story of this eclipse cycle from 18 years ago is that 18 years ago, when I was a child, an adolescent, my sister and I were molested by a astrologer. We went to trial. Wasn't a very good astrologer. We went to trial and went through that experience. And that set in motion a number of things. When the story was revisited 9 years later, so 9 years ago, when the eclipses were again in Libra and Aries, but the North Node was in Libra, so it was the nodal opposition. From that, he self-published a book about how I had been this mastermind and lied and made everything up. My sister found this book and was obsessed and upset by it. And it took her down a dark path that there were other components of. But during those eclipses 9 years ago, she died by suicide. So I've been listening during these eclipse cycles to the echoes of that story, to what has evolved from both the loss and the fury and the loss of power and the terror of power. Because I know how the abuse of astrological power can lead to terrible consequences. And I also know that hiding and refusing our gifts is not the solution. It's how we walk. And I also know that the ethical guidelines will not protect everyone, right? Laws are different from the spirit of the laws. The spirit of the law must be maintained. And when we are doing the work of counseling and the work of astrology, we are entering a sacred space in our imperfection and in our vulnerability. And so the most powerful tool we can hold and maintain in that space is humility. To not have full faith in our own power, to receive the experience of the other. Because healing is not something that we do. It is something that we receive. So you can identify as the healed or as having received healing. But my eyes always narrow at people that identify as healers. Because everyone in their individuality needs something different to heal. Often, people do not need you. They need to be given back to themselves. Sometimes they need the sight of the therapist or the astrologer to give them permission to be who they are and want what they want and find your own path again until the bond between you and that path sing in harmony and you feel the power of moving through it, tracing these old ancient archetypal movements of the psyche through existence that belong to you and belong to the greater lineage of all of humanity. Listen, be curious. Be curious about what you might see and feel and think when you move with your own creativity. I want to point out one more thing, which is the The next step in the Mars retrograde story that we are approaching, which is that 2 days after this Libra eclipse, Mars will enter the shadow of its retrograde when it crosses 17 degrees of Cancer. So just like a Mercury retrograde, we will see themes arise and approach that will be revisited during the retrograde. We will feel a sense of, I imagine with Mars in Cancer, we are going to be talking about emotional exhaustion. We are going to be feeling emotional exhaustion, and a big story is going to be about what we can bear to see and what we cannot. I have talked in previous episodes about the escalating conflict, about the ethnic cleansing being done by Israel on the surrounding territories and the aggression there. And if history is our guide, it is going to escalate quickly. When we go back into history and we look at Mars retrogrades, they almost always begin with an escalation of aggression that then part of the Mars retrograde involves laws around how we are able to engage. Now, often there is a hubris involved with Mars that has to be walked back. You can look at Mars retrogrades that coincided with Napoleon's ill-fated invasion of Russia in the winter, Mars retrogrades that coincided with the Battle of Antietam, the bloodiest battle in US history. These invasions and these acts of aggression that are quite ill-fated ultimately, but their wake of destruction expands our ideas about the power and the anger of Mars. I'm also keenly aware that on Saturday, Mercury, the diplomat in Libra, will square that Mars in Cancer at 17 degrees, this kind of opening movement. And so the emotional heart of Mars in Cancer is not going to be able to bend to the more diplomatic principles of Mercury in Libra. And so we will see the next month play out in the sense that the eclipse on Wednesday is the Libra new moon. And so we are at the beginning of a lunar month that will show us the beginnings of this Mars retrograde story that begins on this fateful eclipse. Keep watching, keep feeling. And if you want to check in on personal stuff happening, on relational stuff happening, you can find me and my offerings at my website. Thanks for watching.